All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. What we're going to take up first on the agenda is review and approval of minutes from last meeting. Montserrat was kind enough to have found a mistake in the wording of one of the items on the minutes. Instead of device, I had written devise, and so I've already corrected that one in the draft minutes. Anybody else have any corrections or additions?
Nope. No.
All right, well then, all in favor of approving the minutes from last month's meeting? Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, that was simple enough. The other item, other than updates on the agenda, was one that Kelly brought to my attention about bog bridging at the Kestrel property. Kelly, I wondered if you could just tell us what you know about this, and what I'll do is show the image that came with your email. I can't really make heads or tails of this image, but
yeah. So I'll wait until it comes up, but there we go. So Josh from Kestrel reached out to me about the bog bridging. We did an RDA for it earlier this spring for a stretch of bridging that was outside of jurisdiction. He said that they had put about 220 feet of the 330 feet they were originally going to place in. And for the rest of the 110 feet that they had planned, he wanted to place it in a different location. So where the bog bridging that was covered under the RDA is entirely outside of any buffer zones or riverfront area, the areas that they want to change the placement on are within the riverfront area mostly. And if Scott, if you zoom in, you can kind of see that it's pretty hard to tell where they are, but there's some little, there's some little magenta blips in there. So it looks like a few pretty short stretches, and it's just those three that would be within the riverfront area, and then three other stretches that would be outside of any kind of buffer zone. And he wondered whether that could be done under the existing RDA or whether he would need to come back for another one.
I'm trying to get oriented to what trail that is. Is it the same trail where they're putting the bog bridging already?
Yeah, I think it is, if I remember correctly, the original placement under the RDA was just north of the riverfront area there.
Okay. All right.
So it was, it was up there.
So this is the stretch they've been working on.
Yeah.
They want to put some additional bridging, looks like, at that intersection. In here. And then here. This is, I assume they're counting this as riverfront area for that stream that it crosses.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
I'm pretty sure that dries up every year. Get anybody else want to confirm that for me? I've been out there lots of times and seen it dry, so I don't think that's a perennial stream.
I agree.
I'll take your word for it, Scott. I haven't been out there in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've seen that dry a number of times. I'm not worried about that being riverfront area. And I think in the past, when they've done some work on the trails, we had concluded that if they're working within the footprint of the path and they're maintaining it, rather than doing some major expansion or widening or upgrading, that we generally consider that just routine maintenance of the trails. And given that the bog bridging is a real benefit in terms of avoiding muddying up the trail, I guess my feeling is that they should not have to submit an RDA in order to complete that job. But I'm happy to entertain anybody else's opinion on this.
Yeah, I say if they're in the general same trail area, it shouldn't be affected by a new RDA to me.
I agree, Scott.
Yeah, me too.
Andrew, can you repeat what you said? I don't think I followed it
If they're
correctly.
still in the general area of the trail, that's
Yeah.
fine with me. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so if we're all in agreement, and so Kelly, if you could get back in touch with Josh and let him know that we're fine with them continuing the work. It's nice that he's sort of looking out for the stream, but that at this point, we doubt that it's a perennial stream. It's not an official finding on the part of the commission, but it's just an opinion that you can hand back to him from Monty and me.
All right, makes sense to me.
All right, so then what's left on the agenda is updates, and most of the updates I think are enforcement related or adjacent to that. So Kelly, I'll hand the floor off to you. You can tell us what's going on River Road, what's going on Chestnut Plain Road, and then also the new Beaver, the Board of Health and what their email about Beaver issues behind the Castaway.
Okay. I guess I'll start off with River Road. I haven't heard any updates from them. As the last I left it with Kevin Helstowski, he said that things were going to be on hold for that NOI he wanted to put in for a while. And I do need to get back in touch with him to see how the knotweed is and how the clearing of the debris is going. But I did tell him to get in touch when he was starting to pull that stuff out of the area that the violation occurred in, and he hasn't yet. So I'm going to get back in touch with him on that. Questions or comments about that one before I move on?
No.
Okay, so next Chestnut Plain Road. We did find out that we had the property owner's information wrong. George sent me and Scott an email that the property had changed hands back in February and the assessors just hadn't updated their information. So I did track down who I believe to be the current owner. He has an address in Greenfield. So I went ahead and sent the enforcement order to that person. And I checked yesterday on the tracking information. It hasn't gotten into the owner's hands yet. It hasn't been signed for. And I don't believe that the old owner has picked theirs up either. So I don't know where that leaves us. I was thinking of maybe reaching out to the assessor, maybe the collector, to see if they have a phone number for them.
My understanding is that this was the estate of Carl and Wilma Brooks, and it was the trust that owned that was essentially two brothers who I think were sons of Carl's and Wilma's, David Brooks and Jason Brooks. And my understanding is that transaction that you're referring to was David buying out his brother's half of that property. My guess is that the original enforcement order that went to the trust, he probably knows about it and therefore doesn't want to pick up the mail the certified mail that's waiting for him. So we may have to find some other way to serve the enforcement order. So yeah, if you could get a telephone, or even a physical address where it could be delivered in person, that might be the way we have to go.
Yeah. The
Have they done
Greenfield,
Have they done any other work down there since?
I don't believe so, but I don't know. I haven't been down there. But there are other people, neighbors and stuff, that know what had been happening. And I think I would get calls if it was continuing. So
Sure.
I'm guessing, I don't know that there was that much more to mow after what they had already done. And I think I might have mentioned at the last meeting that, when I was trying to provide information to the Natural Heritage Program, I discovered that Google Earth had images after the mowing, and you can go back in time and get images before the mowing, and you can see exactly how much of the riverfront area got mowed, got brush hogged. And so that information was sent to the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program, and I think just a couple of days ago I forwarded to you the letter from Natural Heritage to the landowner indicating that they were in violation of the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act, as well as the Wetlands Protection Act.
What do we know about their violation process?
I'm not sure, but I did write back to Melanie and ask her to let us know if they hear anything from the landowner. And her response was that she's going to be checking back in 30 days. So if they don't hear anything within 30 days, then there's another step that they're going to take, but I don't know what that step is. So I'm saving that email so that I can sort of check in with her after that 30-day period is up and see. And you're welcome to as well, Kelly, if you get to it before I do. That's fine.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I guess that's where that is for now. And then what else was there? Oh, the beavers. So the beaver dam that had been breached that we talked about last month, I checked in with Tom from Mass DOT recently about what was going on with that area. I haven't heard anything back, so I'm assuming the flooding hasn't started back up because he probably would have readily gotten in touch. So that area doesn't really have an update for now. And then the Board of Health got in touch with me and Scott yesterday about some more beaver damming just upstream at the access road for the solar farm. I forget what the name of the solar farm is. It's the access road right behind Club Castaway and the same area where we had some beaver activity last spring that had to be dealt with. So I did not go out with the Board of Health to take a look. As far as they told me, the owners just want to do some trapping for now. There's no flow control device or any kind of clearing of the dam that's planned right now. But if there is, then I will go back out and we'll take a look.
Didn't Beaver Solutions get involved in that one? The previous one, I thought they put a flow device in there.
I think that's up.
They did,
further.
yeah.
Yeah. Or was that up further? There was
Yeah,
another.
I thought they had put the device further upstream. It was someone's private property that they had put the flow control device in. I thought maybe they had put one there under that access road, but now that I'm thinking about it more, it might have just been dam clearing.
I think you're right, Kelly. Yeah, because there was the other property up the road. I think they did the diversion, and then they did more. It was like, I remember before there was the problem with the culvert on the access road. They did, I think, clearing and tried trapping again.
Yeah, so the Board of Health is going to meet to talk about whether to permit the taking of beavers to try to alleviate the problem. I remember years ago when we had problems in that area, they eventually came in to trap out the beavers that were backing water up a little further upstream. And the trapper came in and said, I think there's probably 11 that we're going to take out of there. And everybody thought he was nuts. And then he took out 16. So it may be a very temporary solution, trapping out the beavers. And yet I don't know if that area really would work for a beaver deceiver or not, but it'd be nice if the utility company or the solar farm company would consult with Beaver Solutions or someone else to see if there are options for a more permanent solution. And Tom from DOT said that they were going to be consulting with Beaver Solutions. So if you do talk to him, ask him, say, well, last time we heard you were talking to Beaver Solutions. What's come of that? Maybe we can nudge them to take some action, because that culvert gets blocked fairly regularly, either blocked or gets backwatered from a dam a little further downstream. Great. Well, thank you for that report. I guess while we're on the subjects of blocked culverts, Garrett Berry emailed me and said he'd like to talk about problem culverts in town. And so I set up a meeting with him next week. It's actually a week from tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. And we might end up driving around to look at what he considers as problem culverts. If any of you would like to join us, you're welcome to. Just let me know if you plan to come, so that we don't end up leaving without you. And I can just let Garrett know if there's going to be more than just me meeting with him next week. Kelly, you're welcome as well.
You said Thursday at 10:30?
Yep.
Okay.
That's all I have for updates. Does anybody else have anything to raise at this point? Updates or concerns or issues, questions?
Nope.
All right, looks like we can keep this meeting short then. So if there's no other business, then we can adjourn the meeting. And there's the issue of August meetings. So next month I'm going to be on vacation when our normal date is for the Conservation Commission meeting. So in past years, we've just moved it back a week. So that would be the week of the 24th. So I'm just wondering how that week looks for you all. And, we could shoot for Wednesday, the 26th, or if that doesn't work, we can look at any of the other days for that week.
It'd be okay for now for me. It's far enough out.
What would be okay with you, Andrew?
At either those either day in August.
Okay, I can't do the 26th.
26th is out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what was the other option earlier? The 18th?
Well, any evening that week, I think would be an option. I'm gonna try to look up the calendar to see if there are other meetings taking place. I can find out how to get to the calendar.
I could do Thursday the 27th.
Okay, how about the rest of you?
That's fine.
My week is open, so.
Thursday would work for me too.
All right, so we'll see. Well, as long as we have calendar, right? Hold on. I finally found the calendar. It doesn't look like there's anything on the calendar for the 27th. So shall we make that?
Sounds good.
All right. I will let people at town offices know that we're shifting that meeting. And then, yeah, so then I'll just send out the agenda and everything else just a week later, and we'll hope that it doesn't get super busy in the meantime. Usually August is fairly slow, so hopefully we won't have to do a special meeting between now and the second week in August. All right, with that, I bid you adieu and thanks for coming out, and we are now adjourned.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Night.